Listening Library presents Aladdin, adapted by Elizabeth Rudnick, read for you by Emily O'Brien.
Prologue. The mariner stared out at the endless sea before him. If he squinted his eyes and tilted his head just so, he could almost imagine that the waves were dunes of sand, undulating and rippling in the heat of the sun. The squawking of the seagulls hovering above the lone sail that powered his vessel could be, if he listened hard enough, the calls of the camels on the way to market. The sun, though, that was the same, on land or sea. The mariner sighed. He loved the wildness and freedom of the open ocean. He adored waking at his leisure and doing what he wanted with the day, answering to no one but himself and his family. But he did, at times, miss his home in the sands of the desert. Hearing an excited shout, the man smiled, the expression brightening his handsome face. The touch of longing disappeared, and he appeared to light up from within. Turning, he looked over at the cause of his happiness. His two children, Lindy and Barrow, had come above deck and were leaning over the railing. "Wow," Lindy said. "Wow," repeated her younger brother. Following their gazes, the mariner looked over the railing of his modest ship and saw, in the distance, a not-so-modest ship sailing toward them. It was huge, with many masts boasting brilliantly colored sails. While the sides of the mariner's boat were peeled and in need of a coat of paint, the sides of the other ship were gleaming, as if freshly painted that morning. Manning the decks were sailors wearing spotless clothes and, squinting, the mariner could make out elaborate decorations covering the masts and railings. "Wish ours was that fancy," Barrow said with a sigh. The mariner turned back to his children and raised one eyebrow. "Why? Because it looks better?" He waited for an answer. Getting nothing but shrugs, he went on. "This boat has taken us through many a storm. It might not look like much, but it has something theirs never will." "Wood-rotten rats?" Barrow asked, teasing his father. The mariner shot his son a look. "Turn around, close your eyes. Now feel how our boat beats with the rhythm of the great unknown. That is its heart. Understand that true value lies deep within." He paused, watching as his two beautiful children listened to his words. At 9 and 6, they were still so young. More than anything, he wanted them to hold on to that innocence. "Now, which ship would you rather have?" he finally asked, when he had given them time to think. The children's eyes popped open. They glanced at each other, and then in unison they answered, "Theirs." The mariner groaned as the kids began to giggle. Apparently, his lesson had gone unlearned. He needed a new approach, some way to make his children see how lucky they were to have the waves be their backyard and the ship their schoolroom. How lucky they were to live each day with grand possibilities and adventure. The mariner narrowed his eyes. How could he get them to see what he wanted them to see? Then a smile began to tug at his lips. What he needed was a story, and he happened to know a very good one. "I think it's time I told you the story of Aladdin and the Princess and the Lamp." Lindy made a face. "What's so special about a lamp?" she asked. "It's a magic lamp." The children exchanged a skeptical look, but then they shrugged. "We're listening," Barrow said. "Well, listen carefully, because looks can be deceiving, especially in a place like Agrabah." Chapter 1. The sun rose slowly, its light creeping out over the horizon and across the dunes of sand until, at last, it touched the great walls of the city of Agrabah and the brilliant blue sea beyond. Awash in the morning light, the city appeared to glow gold, its fabled bazaars and streets coming to life. The scents of cardamom and other exotic spices filled the air, giving the area a rich perfume all its own. Down at the docks, ships sailed in, their hulls full of treasures from the far reaches of the world. Captains shouted orders to the sailors as they prepared the boats going out to sea, carrying with them all the riches Agrabah had to offer. Above, seabirds circled, their calls as constant as the water lapping on the shore. In the market, vendors opened their stalls, filling boxes with bright fruits and vegetables, silks and satins, and other exotic treasures they would haggle over and sell when the market opened. Musicians toting instruments took their places throughout the market, in the shade cast by the large palace that loomed over the entire city. They would soon fill the streets with delightful sounds and, when the day turned to night, bring the citizens of the city out to get lost in the dances and trances of the Arabian Night. It was a magical place, a place where it seemed anything was possible and where the streets were full of adventure. But it wasn't an easy place to make a living, not for those who called the streets their home. While the palace of Agrabah reflected the region's riches, its streets reflected its reality. To make it, you had to be quick, on your feet and with your wit. Aladdin stared out at the marketplace. It was quickly growing busy as servants and merchants and townsfolk began to go about their daily business, haggling over prices, looking for the freshest fruit or a special silk. Half a dozen different languages filtered through the air, creating a symphony of sound that was oddly soothing. For Aladdin, the sounds, the people, and the hubbub of the marketplace were as familiar as the back of his own hand. Agrabah had been his home for every day of his 20 years. Born a street rat, he had remained a street rat. The corridors and stalls and alleyways had been his playground, his school. The market was where he had honed his skills at borrowing what he needed, when he needed it. He knew that most of those who lived like him had given up hope long ago. They were resigned to a life of just getting by. But not Aladdin. Lifting his eyes to the palace beyond, he felt the same familiar rush he felt every time he took in its towers and caught a hint of the lush gardens beyond. He knew, or rather, he believed, there was more to life. He was going to be somebody, even if that meant just being the best street rat in Agrabah. Shaking his head, Aladdin began to move through the market. Now was not the time to get lost in daydreams. He had more pressing and real issues, like finding breakfast. As his growling stomach was now reminding him, it had been a day since he had eaten anything, and he was in the mood for something sweet. A pomegranate or maybe a spiced bun from Sajja's stall. She always made the best pastries. Just thinking about it made his mouth water. Heading in that direction, he continued planning his day. One thing his less-than-ordinary life required was a plan, and a backup plan to that plan. That morning, he would head to the docks to spot what new goods had arrived in Agrabah with the dawn tide. They would end up in the market the following day, and any street rat worth his salt knew it was best to know what to go after, before anyone else got their hands on it. On his shoulder, his best friend, a monkey named Abu, chattered away, nodding absently in reply as the monkey let out a particularly shrill set of screeches. Aladdin nearly bumped into a woman. Startled, he took a step back, but then a large smile spread across his face as he took in the brilliant and clearly very expensive jewel at her throat. "What's your monkey's name?" the woman asked. "Abu," Aladdin said. In response, Abu tipped the small fez he wore on his head and scampered from Aladdin's shoulder to the woman's arm. The woman let out a delighted laugh. "He's a lovely monkey," she said, cooing to Abu as he weaved around her shoulders. Aladdin shot the monkey a look. Abu nodded and continued to scamper faster and faster. Then, turning his attention back to the woman, Aladdin nodded at her neck. "And that's a lovely necklace," he pointed out. Reaching a hand to her throat, the woman touched the bright jewel hanging off the thick chain around her neck. Aladdin's eyes followed her fingers, but his ears stayed tuned to the noises around him. He had been on the streets long enough to know when he was being conned, and beautiful, beguiling women didn't just walk up to young street rats without some
Sample complete. Ready to continue?